Good morning, everybody. This is Carol. In 2005, the end of June, my brother received 2 telephone calls from her. She said, "I'm lonely living in London. I want to move back to Stockport to be nearer my family." 1 week later, she was found dead in her London flat in circumstances which are still unexplained today. The badge on her uniform says CP Felstead, pupil nurse. That photograph was taken in 1985, aged 21. We were not informed of the death until 2 weeks later, when a coroner's officer telephoned my brother, and it was more good fortune than anything that he was in the house to take the phone call, to say, "Your sister has died 2 weeks previously. There's a funeral service tomorrow and you're welcome to attend." He was upset and the phone call ended. 2 minutes later, the phone rang again. He assumed it was a coroner's officer. It wasn't. It was a female who refused to identify herself, refused to give her role, spoke in a very strange, quiet, modulated voice, a bit like a teacher chastising a small child who's trying to work out 3 and 3 and coming up with 9. And she said, "I'm Carol's next of kin, and your sister's died. I know you're not one of the ones who harmed her," which of course implies that other people have harmed her. "You're welcome to attend the cremation service tomorrow. It can't be cancelled. People are coming from all over the country." Richard tried to compose himself and immediately knew he had to pay full attention to this caller, and he may not get the chance ever again to speak to her. So he started at the beginning. "Who are you?" And she said, "That's not important at the moment." He said, "Of course it's important. Who are you? What's your name?" She said, "I'm Carol's next of kin." He said, "What did Carol die of?" She said she had a very difficult childhood. He said, "No, she didn't. I spent that childhood with her." The person refused to identify herself and the call ended. Later that day, my father spoke with the coroner's officer. And the telephone conversation went like this. "Do you know that your daughter's died?" "Yes, my son has told me." A pause. "Do you know that Carol made allegations?" "What allegations?" "Carol said she was abused." "Why would Carol say that?" Another pause. "Do you know that Carol changed her name?" "What's the new name?" "Carol Myers." At this point, my dad is wondering where the coroner's officer has got the identity mixed up with another person. There's a further pause, and she said, "Carol left a document." "What sort of a document?" "A life assessment document." "What is one of those?" "It's a review of her life." And when we finally got this document a couple of weeks later, it wasn't dated, it wasn't signed, it didn't name anybody specifically. Every name was generic: brother, sister, father, mother. There's a further pause, and my father said, "What's in the document?" And the document stated that Carol had been emotionally, physically, sexually abused from birth. It claimed that she'd been mute until the age of 5. It claimed that she worked as a child prostitute. It claimed that she'd missed her schooling because of her abusive upbringing. The central definitive traumatic allegation of her life was that my mother supposed to murder another baby, sat Carol on top of her, and set fire to her house, to presumably to conceal what she's done. The correct chronology was that Carol was born in 1964. According to her birth and death certificate, there was a house fire. It was a tragic accident. It was reported on the front page of a local newspaper. It took place in 1963, 1 year before Carol was born. There was another baby. Her name was Joan Julie. She was Down syndrome and had a defective heart. She was ill from birth. My father's an engineer. He received a telephone conversation saying, "You need to come to work, come to the hospital because Joan Julie's deteriorating." He got to the hospital, he was taken into a side ward, and she died in front of him. That was in 1962, 2 years before Carol was born. So events are not only false, they're impossible, because Carol wasn't alive when these things were supposed to have taken place. Carol was a normal, happy, outgoing person When she was 21, she began to behave a bit differently. She became moody, sullen, and she gradually broke off contact with family. I used to joke it would be easier getting a telephone call booked in with the Pope than it was with Carol. Eventually she vanished. Okay, we had no idea what had happened. She'd make phone calls once a year, once every 18 months. She always said she was pursuing her career, had no obvious problems. The explanation was never entirely convincing, but we had nothing else to go on. We certainly didn't conceive at the time that Carol had come to develop false memories about her whole life. Following the conversation between the coroner's office and my father, and it became clear at the end of that conversation, my dad didn't know what she was talking about. She had an ace card, which she played at the end of it. She said, well, there was a trial, wasn't there? And Dad said, well, trial? What trial? Who was in that? He said, you and your wife. A satanic ritual abuse trial. It happened in Manchester and collapsed after 3 days. There's no trial. Nobody's ever interviewed or questioned about any allegations concerning Carol. So my dad said, I don't know who's giving you your information, but I'm going to disprove it. I'm going to contact the police and get a letter off them saying that there was no trial. And when I get that letter, I want a copy of this life assessment document. She said, it's very upsetting. He said, well, send it to me anyway. My brother phoned up the coroner's officer and said, we want to cancel the cremation service. Can we do that? She said, yes. As soon as she said yes, he knew immediately there's something wrong with it, because you cannot cancel a funeral once it's been arranged if it's got legitimate status. We had an inquest into her death in August 2005. It was a complete whitewash. In the meantime, my father had spoken to a police officer, and the police officer was using a term next of kin, psychiatrist and therapist, interchangeably. Dad said, is this the same person? He said, yes. He said, well, who is it? He said, Fleur Fisher, as if the words meant something to us. He wrote the words down on a piece of paper, and we didn't particularly think any more of it. We went to the inquest, and we were expecting Fleur Fisher to be called to give evidence, whoever she was. We didn't know then that the day after Carol died, she'd been into Carol's flat, emptied the flat, taken her property, disposed of it. According to the coroner for Inner West London, she'd actually sold the property, and that 2 weeks later she was driving Carol's car around on an insurance policy on the day of the London bombings. But we expected all of this to come out, all the information at the inquest. When we got there, Fleur Fisher wasn't named, she wasn't alluded to. What we didn't know at that time, that she wasn't an ordinary person. She was a former head of ethics at the British Medical Association. Her full title is Dr. Fleur Fisher, but that was unknown to us at the time. Following the inquest, which returned an open verdict, we realised that something had gone tragically wrong in Carol's life, and that we must do some work ourselves. So the first job was to try to get the medical and psychiatric records. They put a legal team on the case. And they refused to give them to us. We persisted. Eventually we got them. They came in different batches. We got the life assessment documents, and we put it all together. And it showed that Carol, in 1985, went to see her GP with persistent headaches. They couldn't find a cause of the headaches, so she was referred to psychology to see the cause might in fact be psychological. Along the way, she was seen by 3 consultants. One gave her, quote, a clean bill of health. Another one said there's no family history of any significance. And the third one thought that Carol might be suffering migraine due to stress of her final nursing examinations. When we got the psychiatric records, it was a total shock to us. Carol was given hypnotherapy. According to the notes, it says, Carol was extensively abused from birth. Carol can't remember the details, but further information will be revealed in due course. Well, if there's only 2 people in the room, if Carol's saying she can't remember it, who's actually saying it? From there, Carol went, according to psychiatric records, to the Tavistock Clinic in London, where she saw somebody called Dr. Valerie Sinerson. Dr. Sinnerson has described in the national press, in the Observer magazine, to an investigative journalist, and the interview was taped, how she saw Carol in the waiting room, and Carol was limping. Now, if I saw somebody with a limp, I'd assume, A, they've got a bad foot, B, they should get an x-ray, C, they should see the GP, or D, get some physio, or perhaps look at your footwear. No, no, no. She said, I knew it was her, and she was fleeing from them. From there, she went to the Centre for Autogenic Studies in Harley Street in London, where she was given further hypnotherapy. That treatment was so severe that she had to be sedated following the sessions. Her psychiatric records allege that my mother and father were the leaders of the satanic cult. Just so you can recognise a leader of a satanic cult, he sat on the front row here. You need to be careful about that. And responsible for worse crimes by genocide. These included at least 8 murders. Carol's medical records show that she was never pregnant, but the allegations say that Carol had 6 babies, richly conceived and murdered by the cult. There were allegations that she was assaulted with a claw hammer in Conservative Party headquarters by 2 of former Prime Minister Thatcher's government. Completely false, incidentally. The allegations were a complete and utter shock. At that time, we knew nothing about memory, nothing about false memory. That thought didn't occur to us. Following the inquest in 2005, which was completely unsatisfactory, and after receiving Carol's psychiatric records, we applied to the Attorney General's office to quash the inquest. Now, the standard legally is understandably very high, and you have to be given permission to go to High Court in the Royal Courts of Justice in London. We were given permission on our first point. We had a second inquest in September 2015. Prior to that, there were 2 pre-inquest hearings and a pre-inquest hearing on the day. The inquest was a video recording of the first inquest. Dr. Fisher gave evidence on a video link with a light above her head. She completed a 106-page statement for the inquest, and the coroner redacted 87 pages, that is, i.e. blanked out 87 pages of it. And this coroner has now got the Grenfell Tower inquiry. The inquest returned an open verdict again. The Information Commissioner's Office has said that we are entitled as interested parties to have that statement unredacted, even if you don't use the information in the inquest. But they refused to give it to us. So we applied again to quash a second inquest, which is virtually unprecedented. It's been done once before, as far as we can tell. And we went back to Attorney General's office, and we were given permission again on our first complaint point to return to the High Court to quash the second inquest and convene a third one. However, this time, the coroner said she wants to defend the action. We're an ordinary family with no legal resources, and you're not entitled to legal representation equal to the coroner in these cases. They have a very active litigation team. Even if you win, you can get phenomenal costs. So we've withdrawn, and we're now campaigning to get the law changed so that bereaved families have the same legal status in a coroner's court as the state. I want to be very, very clear about the so-called memories that Carol developed. We're not talking here about genuine abuse, and the science is very clear on this. Trauma is more likely to be remembered. That's why we all know about Grenfell Tower. We're not going to block it out and repress it. These therapists who practice recovered memory therapy, they believe that all of your problems as an adult result in your childhood, and that something traumatic must have happened to you. So we have 2 very distinct data sets. If you look at the Harvey Weinstein scandal, Barry Bennell, these people have always had cognitive recollection of what's happened to them. They've not needed a regression therapist to unpick these memories. They deliberately, for very good reason, not reported and delayed reporting. The British False Memory Society was set up in 1993. It's had over 3,500 callers since then, and we think we're the tip of a very, very large iceberg. It was set up because parents, primarily, were phoning up saying their adult accusers were suddenly making claims that they'd been abused in childhood. But they previously had no memory of that abuse. And we're talking in some cases about being raped dozens, hundreds of times. And until they've gone to see a hypnotherapist or a psychotherapist who takes you back in time, they're now claiming these things have happened to them. The techniques they use are the same as past lives regression, alien abductions, particularly around LA where everybody's in therapy. And I want to make the distinction here as well, that there are some very good therapists about. They do a very good job from what I can tell. But these people are a menace to society. We had 3 cases at trial in January 2015. They all resulted in not guilty verdicts. In one of those cases, I spotted it, the allegations were lifted out of a popular book. And the jury returned a verdict after 30 minutes. In another case, involving somebody who used to be the equerry or the private secretary for the Duke of Edinburgh, he's convinced he never even met his accuser. In court, the barrister for the Crown said to the defence barrister, "Do you think she's drunk?" when she gave her evidence. She was probably medicated. Carol took so much psychotropic medication that she must have rattled. She had physical problems because an operation went wrong. One consultant said she was taking so much morphine that she had problems distinguishing people's faces in front of her. We have 2 members with the British False Memory Society currently on police bail, where their accusers have been to see a psychotherapist about an adult problem. Will they go to trial? We don't know. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Oh, Kevin, Kevin, come back, please. Come back on the stage. I've got a few questions for you,
Sure.
if you might. So first of all, thank you, thank you for sharing this really personal story. I mean, my mind is boggling that things like that can actually happen in real life. I've got one question for you. So, false memories are quite rare human phenomena of human psychology. What is the average rate of false memories in the population?
I don't know how you quantify it, but memory does not work like a video recorder. We all think it does, but it doesn't. So this study has been done. If I said to you, where were you 3 days ago, 3 weeks ago, 3 months ago, 3 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, what did you do on that day? Now, unless you've got a diary, or unless it was your birthday, I suggest to you that it would be difficult to remember that. If you put your keys somewhere and you can't find them, as I do regularly, and you think they're in a drawer, and you keep returning to that drawer, they're not there, that is a false memory. It's far more prevalent than we like to think. And you don't just need to have poor psychotherapy to get false memories. We reconstruct things. These therapists give you all sorts of techniques. They will say to you, well, okay, you can't remember these things happening, but what do you think it would be like if it did happen to you? Write down your dreams. But the answer to your question is it's a lot more prevalent than we think it is.
Right. Well, again, thank you for sharing your story. And we actually have a little gift for you. So thank you for coming
Thank you very
to our
much.
conference.
Thank
and again, please, round of applause, Kevin Felstead.